We turn our attention now, I mentioned right at the very top this morning that today is Early Career Scientist Day here at ICRI, and this next session is kind of close to that, I would argue. I mean, the panellists might disagree with me, but they're not here yet, so it doesn't matter. We're looking at the skill sets needed today and, importantly, into the future. How do we develop our next generation of leaders? Because as talented as you all are, you're not going to last forever. So we need to make sure that we're investing in the future, and how we do that, when we do it, and indeed what your role is in that is what we're about to find out. No pressure at all. To moderate our next session, I'm very pleased to invite this moderator back. She's already done this once. She begged to do another one, and we just felt sorry. It was last night over a couple of drinks. I think I was in a weakened state. But as it turns out, she's fabulous, so I'm quite happy to do that, to come good on that invitation. Will you please put your pre-lunch hands together and warmly welcome to the stage the Chief Executive of Microscopy Australia, Dr. Lisa Yen.
Hi everyone, and thanks for welcoming me warmly back to the stage. It's great to be with you again. In this session, as mentioned, we're going to explore some of those skills needed for today and into the future that will ensure the ongoing future success of research infrastructures around the world. I think you will join me in agreeing that the incredible expertise offered by the staff from across research infrastructure facilities is what really drives and unlocks the potential of the physical and digital resources across hardware, software, data and culture. My thanks to Kerry from in the previous session that really set the scene regarding why Hope and Wonder is part of our ICRI program. And I can remember as part of the program committee immediately connecting with the incredible resource and expertise as thinking of that ways to support hope and wonder in the future from our staff. Training and skills development is a topic that has often fascinated me. I join you today as part of Microscopy Australia, but actually my training was a degree in psychology, followed by a PhD in phonetics or about speech production. And I fairly quickly decided that I didn't want to pursue an academic career. But I also realised that the skills that my education had provided were incredibly valuable in facilitating and helping others to conduct their amazing research projects. Over a number of different institutional and national research centres, I was eventually drawn into Australia's research infrastructure program, the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy. And my role with Microscopy Australia as a distributed research infrastructure provides resources and connects 18 microscopy facilities in Australia by both directly funding instruments and experts in 9 institutions and providing career development and networking opportunities to connect with another 9 linked laboratories. We are connected internationally with other microscopy and imaging facilities, and I'm currently chair of the Global BioImaging Network, which we'll hear a little bit more about during this session. Our collective expertise have developed something that we are incredibly proud of called MyScope. It's a free online training platform for microscopy that's been developed over the last 10 years, growing from an initial 6 modules. Now it is 13 modules, with a micro CT currently being developed. This platform, available to everyone, everywhere, for free. Each module covers the theory and applications of techniques, most with a virtual instrument or simulator that allows users to use them before going into a facility, and a quiz that helps check on the level of learning that new student or new researcher has undertaken. We see this as a real powerful way of developing skills for our future researchers and for our future research facility staff. So I'm delighted to be joined today by a series of different speakers who are going to give some little vignettes or little stories about the way that they've been working to develop our future generation of research infrastructure leaders. And then that's going to be followed by some more interactive opportunities for you within the audience. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite Emeritus Professor Joe Shapter, who's held academic positions at Flinders University and the University of Queensland, and he's currently a member of the Australian National Research Infrastructure Advisory Group. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Lisa. First I want to do something, I guess, Lisa, and that is to say thanks to you for making sure this session happens. It's absolutely critical and probably will upset lots of people. It's always about the people, okay? And I've been really pleased to hear a number of people say that through the session, so that's been really great. Now I assume if I press the green button. So first I'd just like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yugara people whose lands we're on today, and they're the traditional owners. Certainly acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, I guess, big picture, and then we're going to zoom down into the workforce a bit if we can. So in Australia, we actually like to think that we're well coordinated. We do national research infrastructure in a coordinated way, and you've already heard about NCRIS, I think, a number of times in various sessions already, and that's one small part of the puzzle, okay? But because of that national approach, what has happened over the last 15 years is we write one of these roadmaps. And the roadmaps basically try to do two things. The first thing they try to do is look forward. What are the really important research themes that Australia needs to worry about over the next 5 to 10 years? And critically for us, of course, for this audience is what research infrastructure do you need to do the work that you need to do in those research themes, okay? So that's what the roadmaps are all about. For the Australians in the room, I'll just note that, you know, that one says 2021 on it. Everybody here will know that means the next one is in 2026. And so next year, of course, we'll be doing lots of work with everybody in the room to develop the 2026 roadmap. Now, one of the things the roadmap said, okay, was, and several roadmaps have said, is you should set up an advisory group. Okay, and it said that many, many times. And amazingly, out of the last one, we set up an advisory group. Okay, it's led by Liz Sonnenberg from the University of Melbourne, incredibly capably, and you can see the list of people involved there. It's a real diverse group of people, and importantly, there are lots of parts of government also sitting in the room. Okay, both from funders and various parts of the government. The critical thing about that, I guess, is that we are there to advise government. Okay, and so it's our opportunity as a community, and one of the things we certainly do is consult a lot, and it's our opportunity to say to government, beyond the roadmap, where are we headed, what do we need to do, okay? So out of the last roadmap, as I said, it tries to look forward, and this is actually the work plan for the advisory group, and you may or may not be able to read that. I'm just going to actually work my way from the bottom up. So one of the things roadmaps often say is, you know, you really should think about making an extra investment in certain areas. And the last one talked about doing it in collections, environment and climate, in translation, you know, how do we translate using research infrastructure? And then it also talked about NDRI, National Digital Research Infrastructure. And we're doing a whole pile of work at the moment to help define the investment plan in that area. And then right up at the top is workforce. Okay, now I always like to joke, so if you get out the 2011 roadmap, it says the workforce is absolutely critical to everything we do. But they work in a challenging environment. Okay? If you get out the 2016 roadmap, it says the workforce is a really important component, but they work in a challenging environment. If you get out the 2021 roadmap, it says, well, you can guess what it says. All right? So when the advisory group started, one of the things that I said is there's no way in the 2026 roadmap are we going to write the staff are important, blah, blah, blah. So we started a couple of years ago to think about how we can make a difference. And I'm just going to walk you through 3 things. So the first thing is at the institutional level. Now, I want to be very clear. There has been lots of work at different universities in Australia to help address the environment in which research infrastructure staff are working. But those developments are typically driven by passionate individuals, okay, who are trying to make a difference. But it's not sector-wide. So we've recently made a decision to try to bring the technicians' commitment, the UK technicians' commitment to Australia. For those of you who are not familiar with this organization, started in the UK, we've all got the same problems with our workforce, okay? People always like to try to tell you it's unique. It's not. And what this organization does is they go to an institution, so your institution signs up, and they basically ask you they ask the institution to explain what they're doing in these 4 areas. How are their technicians visible? How do they get recognized for the work that they do? Is there career development opportunities and pathways? And do they have sustainable careers? The idea is that the institution defines where they are and where they hope to go. Okay? And of course, hopefully people learn best practice from other places, and we raise the whole level of the environment in which our people are working. Okay? So that's an institutional thing. The second thing that is happening is that we've set up, I shouldn't say we've set up ICRI. Not ICRI, ICRI. And I want to point out Sach, I'm going to get Sach to stand up. So Sach Jayasinga, and this is the time you need to applaud. So Sach has driven the setup of this academy. And now this is the people part. Individual staff join up, okay? So this is the Professional Association of Research Infrastructure Staff in Australia, okay? And again, what do we want? Well, this is a place where we can get everybody together and build a voice for all those staff, okay? It's a chance for people to network, to learn from each other, and that's what the knowledge transfer is about, and about professional development and upskilling, okay? So. And you'll see there's a website there, so especially for all the Australians in the room, you can now join. And one of the most powerful messages that we've got some issues to solve is join up. Okay? Let's have really healthy conversations. Now you'll see lots of the elements here are all about knowledge transfer and networking and professional development, and I hope I wouldn't have to make too much of an argument here that you would all agree that those are good things. But in Australia, at least, they don't happen. And the reason they don't happen mostly is because people have day jobs. So a conversation, and the funding in Australia is not high enough that we have redundancy built into our system. So if somebody goes into their supervisor and says, I'd like to take 6 weeks to go off and learn how to do whatever. All right, the supervisor says, that's a wonderful idea, and it's never going to happen. Okay? So the third component then is what we're calling mobility, and we want to think about doing that through some fellowships. Now, for the Australians in the room, this is not funded. No idea how we're going to do this, so do not start writing applications. Okay? But I do want to say a couple of things about it. So the first thing is, we're supposed to be talking about the skills that people need for the future. So the advisory group view of this is that we need to be incredibly broad and liberal about what those skills might be. Okay, they might be technical, they might be professional development, but there'll be all kinds of great skills that people could develop, okay, and do their job more effectively. We need to be really open about that conversation. So in a little while, Lisa's going to give you a bit of work to do, and I want to encourage you to think outside the box. Okay, what are the skills that our staff really need? And don't just say, it'd be great if they could learn to do what they currently do better. Let's think big, right? There are lots of great new skills that we can build. The other really important thing about that fellowship scheme is we're all here because RI is global, right? We need to learn from each other internally and, of course, externally. And so the fellowships offer, we hope, if it's funded, it's not funded, if we ever find a way to do this, okay, it'll be funded in a way that, of course, Australian workers could potentially go elsewhere, and equally, of course, people could come to Australia. And so we'll start learning from each other, and that would be a great outcome. So those are the three things that we're trying to work on. This one is very much up for conversation, and the more input we get here so that we get this right is really important. You know, we want to be sure that young people have access to this. We want to make sure people with families can have access to that, and that means we've got to get the settings right at the beginning. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening, and look forward to conversations later. Thanks.
Thank you. Really appreciate some of that national context setting. It's now my delight to invite Antje Kepler, who has a PhD in chemical biology and is the director of the Euro BioImaging ICRI BioHub, who leads an international team to coordinate pan-European services for biological imaging. She's also chair of the ICRI Forum and coordinator of the Global BioImaging Network. Thanks, Antje.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you also to the ICRI organizers and to you as our chair for the session. As Joe already said, this is super important. So the question on the table is how to prepare a skilled workforce to meet the evolving needs of future research infrastructures. And I think the first question that Joe also just said, and we are looking at it a little bit later in a more active approach, I would say, is to look what skills are actually needed. And based on the experience that I personally gained by working with research infrastructures for the past 15 years is here highlighted on the slide. Of course, the first one is always, and the laser doesn't work, okay. So the first one is always advanced scientific and technical expertise. This is what you learn during university, but most of the times it just stops there. But in research infrastructures, you need also management skills, including finance administration. You need to be able to train other people. You need strategic thinking for keeping your research infrastructure up to date. You need the experience also to work with not only academic users, but also people coming from industry, which requires really a different set of skills. And you need soft skills. You have to manage a team, something that you do not learn during your university studies. You also have to learn to work under time pressure that comes along, but you are probably not prepared for the limitation of resources that you are dealing with. And then you need lobbying skills, because you have to be able to talk to your boss, to your dean, you have to be able to talk to politicians to lobby for your next business plan to keep your research infrastructure up and running. And that all needs conviction, commitment, and a lot of resilience. And how do we get there? I would like to give you in the few next minutes 4 examples. I start with my home base, so to speak, with Euro BioImaging. We are an infrastructure which is now 5 years old, and we have currently under the umbrella of Euro BioImaging ICRI 237 individual imaging facilities. That means 800 people working at these facilities that from one day to the next became Euro BioImaging staff. How do they deal with this? We feel it as our responsibility to be there for these people, to help them to acquire new skills and to get to the point that they are open and qualified to serve users now coming from all around Europe and all around the world. We have therefore launched a new training program, which is currently funded through the EU project called Evolve, which will provide training courses in the future, but it's already providing a mentoring and a job shadowing program. And this is providing a space where people are coming together. We are not directly involved from the level of the ICRI, but we are really trying to bridge across countries, across different imaging facilities, across different levels of expertise by peer-to-peer training, exchange of experience, collaboration, building networks, and of course, they can also inspire and support each other. To give you a short flavor of the job shadowing program, this started about half a year ago, and already in the very first open call, we were overrun with expressions of interest. And in a short time, we were now able to grant 24 applications where people are now traveling from one place to another with a travel grant in Europe to stay there for a week or 2 to learn from each other how do you manage your facility, how do you deal with difficult users coming in, or let me see your latest microscope, because we are also looking into acquiring the same instrument. I had planned to read these quotes to you, but it's a little bit difficult from this position, so maybe you can have a look yourself. But for sure, they will show you that the people who have been already going through this job shadowing program, they are learning a lot, but in addition, they are really building new collaborations, almost friendships, and now are building a family across the different Eurobiomaging sites to continue helping each other, inspired for technological developments, as well as how to manage their places. The other activity that is now up and running in Eurobiomaging is this mentoring program, where we are pairing, already paired 20 mentor-mentees together, and this is something that goes across the borders of Europe. This we opened up to also to our global contacts, so that overall we have now already in this first 20 couples, 50 nationalities across all continents. And together in the next 6 months, they are looking at the topics of career development, business strategy, and entrepreneurship, which is very important because we are increasingly seeing that industry users are coming to the imaging facilities. And this is something new that we are seeing. And it does require a new set of skills. And with this, I would like to go to the global sphere. And Lisa was already indicating there's Global BioImaging, which is an international community of imaging infrastructures, national imaging communities, as well as imaging scientists, and it's open to everyone who's interested to join. It started in 2016 by Australia, India, and Europe joining forces to launch Global BioImaging, but very quickly after, we had participants and national networks from all around the globe. So right now we have 13 partner networks representing 63 individual countries. And again, one of the key activities here is the training of the people in all these different places. And we have been running international training courses currently funded through the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative in the places indicated here on this map. Next year, the next training course will take place here in Australia, organized in close collaboration with Microscopy Australia and National Imaging Facility Australia. Again, this provides a space where people come together from all around the world. And in Global BioImaging, we are focusing mostly on courses that are dedicated to management of research infrastructure, as well as on how to work with image data management, fair image data acquisition. And you can see here that in the virtual courses that started during the pandemic, we had 2,200 participants by now, whereas through the in-person courses we had a reach of almost 400 people. And to give you an impression on how this looks like, not only that these courses are taking place in different locations around the globe in close collaboration with the local hosts and the partner networks, but the participants in these individual courses are also coming from all around the world. And when we are looking through the applications, we are really giving those applicants so-called brownie points that can convincingly show to us their motivation to go back home afterwards to become multiplicators of the knowledge that they gain in these courses. So these courses really have a tremendous effect, and we have received so many letters and success stories afterwards, how people benefited for their own career, how they developed their own training program at home, how they started talking to their own funder, that it's sometimes almost mind-blowing. Another activity in addition to the training courses that we provide in Global BioImaging are those international working groups. Again, this is open to anyone who's interested in the topics. It all runs out of charge, so we don't have membership fees. Everyone can really join us. And the topics are, for example, the impact assessment of imaging infrastructures, the topic of biomedical imaging or training, and career path development. And Graham Wright, I believe, will tell you more about this in a minute. The third activity in Global BioImaging brings together the people representing their national imaging facilities, as well as the directors for imaging infrastructures and imaging scientists in the annual Exchange of Experience conferences that have been up and running since 2016. What we start seeing here is an increasing interest coming from industry. So industry is really joining now those conferences and sponsoring those conferences. And again, it's I think the people going home after these meetings, they are really feeling inspired to start for example, like in Singapore, we saw their own imaging infrastructure and start negotiating with their funders after learning from the colleagues from around the world how they did this. I would like to change a little bit the gear. So far, we talked about the training opportunities and collaboration opportunities for the people working at the research infrastructures. But of course, there are also the users of the research infrastructures. And sometimes we are underestimating how little they actually need to really benefit from the existing infrastructures out there. But they sometimes need that little bit of extra training or that little bit of travel funding or being able to pay for the access fees that is missing. And right now, we are in the position that Wellcome Trust reached out to Global BioImaging to help so that we can help them in a pilot project to cascade funding to researchers coming from in low and medium income countries to access existing imaging infrastructure or to access an international training course. And the first call just closed last weekend, and we are looking now at over 80 applications that came in through this still unknown project. And I don't want to know what happens next spring when we launch the second call and the word is spreading that this opportunity exists. So people can apply here for up to 20,000 euros to access an infrastructure or to go to a training course. And I think this is really a tool that we can learn from, that just a little bit of extra funding can often make a whole difference to the researchers involved in these countries and also to be involved and connected to the existing research infrastructure landscape. Let me conclude on ERIC Forum, which is again very different. And while ERIC Forum has a lot of missions, personally for me, I think what it does is training of the directors of those research infrastructures. Because ERICs are a young legal tool. The first ones were launched about 10, 12 years ago. And since 2017, they have been coming together bottom up in the ERIC Forum, where we are now 28 of these so-called ERICs, representing the social sciences, environmental sciences, life sciences, astronomy, physics, high energy. But we are all struggling often with very similar problems: how to implement the ERIC, how to deal with the daily challenges of the operation of such an ERIC. And ERIC Forum is the place where we meet regularly to tell each other about the lessons learned, to help each other with the solutions that we have identified. And for me, it's actually the perfect training ground for research infrastructure managers at the more senior level. Thank you very much for your attention. And let me know in case of questions.
Antia recently told me that someone asked if she could be cloned, and I think you might agree that there's a lot of content and a lot of different projects that she's involved in. So thank you, Antia. We'll now turn to Dr. Graham Wright, who has an interdisciplinary PhD from the University of Edinburgh with an MBA from the Warwick Business School and over 16 years' experience in leading advanced microscopy core facilities. He's currently the Director of the Research Support Centre within Singapore's Agency for Science, Technology and Research. Graham.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Sounds like you're losing your voice, so this may be the last session you get to do. Thank you for organising this session. Thanks to the organisers for the opportunity to speak. As Lisa said, I work in Singapore at the Agency for Science, Technology and Research, and I've been intimately involved with the Global BioImaging initiative now for some time, and I'll share some of those initiatives around career paths for imaging scientists, as we call it, but I think it's broadly applicable also to people working in research infrastructures more broadly, as the audience here should be, of course, interested in. So to start with, I'm coming from a few different perspectives. One of global bioimaging and our involvement with that, but at a regional level, the Imaging Southeast Asia, which I'm very proudly showing our brand new logo for, which Satoshi and I have been working with Leong and others in the US to start developing a Southeast Asian network of imaging capabilities and people that are involved in that, which is, of course, critical. Singerscopes at the national level is a light microscopy predominantly imaging infrastructure network across the whole of Singapore, which is admittedly not very big, but we're very well resourced and can leverage on one another for our capabilities. And then at the A-star level, the A-star microscopy platform. Really what I want to focus on talking about today is the work we've done as the Global BioImaging Career Paths for Imaging Scientists community, which is one of the groups that Antje just introduced as one of the working groups of Global BioImaging. And we have set out from the meeting we hosted in Singapore to then form an international recommendation, which is on the left here, available on the GBI website, which sets out recommendations for supporting supporting the people and supporting the career paths of the people working in these imaging facilities, imaging networks at a regional and international level. We then took that same paper and made a shorter form, perhaps slightly more digestible version of it, I guess, in the Journal of Microscopy. And I'd reiterate again, whilst this is targeting imaging scientists and people working in microscopy, I think some of the messages are very, very broadly applicable and transferable to other technologies and other research infrastructures. I'll credit my colleagues. You can see the huge number of authors that contributed to this. It was a truly global effort. I remember when we were writing it using Google documents and so on, it would just magically form on screen as we were all writing in our ideas. And then the task of editing that down to something reasonable and digestible came to Kerry and myself, working very, very closely with Yara from Global BioImaging to make this into the paper that it is. So please go and read this and hopefully use it in your own context. I should say I've now stepped down as the co-chair of this working group, and Johanna and Michelle Itano have stepped up into that role and take this initiative forward, as I'll talk about in the coming slides. So in the paper, we focused on 4 main sections that were derived from user feedback, as I'll touch on in the next slide, to first of all define what an imaging scientist was and where that fits in the spectrum of academic or industry careers. And as we notice and recognize that there's overlap there between people working in industry, people working in core facilities, people working as purely academic scientists with associations with core facilities and other such things. And that's the Venn diagram that's disappearing into the background of the slide. We also recognize that an imaging scientist working in a core facility has many, many different roles that span disciplines. And I think this was touched on in both Joe's talk as well as Antje's, about the variety of different roles that these individuals have and the value of the contributions that they make. I won't go through them, but around the octagon, hexagon up at the top there, you can see some of these identified. So the paper that took the form of it, describing what an imaging scientist is, recognizing the value and the impact that they have, and I think reiterating that it's been said many times that it's about the people, not just that the equipment that they have available at the resources, but what makes the difference is the people that are working in those facilities. We then focused, and perhaps very relevant to this session, on the recruitment and the retaining of the talent and the continued development of those, whether through training, continuous professional development, and other such forms, recognizing this is absolutely key to retaining these people and to continuing to develop these research infrastructures. And one thing that came out of it at the bottom right here was the variety of tasks that these individuals are involved in. I think Antje alluded to that on her opening slide, and Joe likewise on some of the things that become important for the individuals and their professional development. That is really context specific, but it's really a blend of these different skill sets and roles that these individuals and people play. How did we identify these sections to focus on? Well, we ran a very reasonably large scale survey, which at the minute we've had 215 respondents to. You're very welcome to add to that if you want to take out your phones and scan the QR code if you're working in this space. And that really helped us identify what the top 5 challenges that people working in these roles experience, and therefore we tailored the paper specifically over those different areas that you can see on the histogram. I should also say we've presented this and promoted this at several forums to get more and more feedback and continually improve the paper and the future directions of this work. You can see Lisa and I back in Cape Town a year ago doing such an event. So as this group now moves forward from the paper, we have started it's been the year of the career, I think is how we identified it. And this is the session of early career scientists, so it's all very, very appropriate. But we've moved on from the paper to then start focusing on success stories or initiatives that have been put in place that have made a difference in different contexts, different locations. And we've had a so-called Spotlight seminar series where we run them on 2 time zones to make sure we hit the global audience that we're dealing with. Maybe have less of a late night for our Australian colleagues, as is often the case. And you can see lots of different perspectives here. Sash, as was mentioned earlier, has been very important in that process too. And you can see the different geographic contexts here, from Australia to Singapore to Africa, South America, Europe, and the US represented on this slide. And to finish, Lisa asked me just to make a mention. You can see I gave one of the seminars here focused on whether an MBA type training is of any use to someone working in these roles. And it's been interesting to hear some people have also been through this. I myself undertook an MBA a few years back, and I think it's been very relevant for me, my own career development, and the tools and the skills and the areas and disciplines that I learned as part of that process have been extremely useful in continuing to develop my own career and run the facilities and the infrastructures that I'm involved with and the networks that I'm involved with. And I think we saw that on Antje's slide. Some of the things like accounting, marketing, strategic thinking, operations management, all were deliberately chosen on my part to be focused on developing myself in that area. And I also got to focus the dissertation around what I thought was important for my work at the time. Now, recognizing this and recognizing that not everyone can make that kind of commitment of time or potentially financially, there are many, many courses out there that I'd like to highlight that go to these same aims, really, of training people in some of these skills that are required, hard skills and soft skills, to run them. I highlight 2 here that I'm familiar with. One's the Kellogg School of Business at Northwestern in the US, established by Phil Hochberger, and the second is by German BioImaging. And you can see the details of what they cover in these courses are extremely relevant, but are not what's generally in the formal education of a pure science background, for example. Another thing I'd like to emphasize, and I think this room has huge potential in this regard, is to support our early career scientists and people working in the research infrastructures through different mechanisms. And we've heard about job shadowing, mentorship programs, and other things. And I'd like to recognize some of the people that have been very important to me. Ian Smith, I think, is probably in the room somewhere, was great at mentoring me and advising me as I went through a bit of a role change in Singapore. And I think the societies have an enormous role to play in this, whether it's global networks or formal societies, but they, again, are this wealth of exceptional people that can really help support the growth of early career scientists. So events like this being a very good example of that. So with that, I will finish. Thank you for your attention and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Graham. I will now turn over to Dr. Tim Rawling, who is a PhD in structural geology and is the CEO of AusScope, a national research infrastructure for the national geoscience community working on fundamental geoscience questions and grand challenges like climate change, natural resources scarcities, and natural hazards. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks very much, Lisa. So AusScope, I've only got a couple of slides, so hopefully I can give you plenty of time to have the discussion that we're hoping to have as part of this session. AusScope is NCRIS research infrastructure. You've heard a lot about NCRIS already today. We represent Earth and geospatial sciences. And we consider geoscience to be an integrative science. And what I mean by that is geoscience is chemistry looking at the Earth, it's physics looking at the Earth, it's mathematics looking at the Earth, it's biology understanding the evolution of the Earth. So we bring together a whole bunch of different sciences, but with that come its own challenges. It's also an incredibly fascinating subject. So when you talk to people about geoscience, they tend to be engaged by it. And it's never been a problem when I've been stuck in an elevator with somebody, I think, to make them interested in geology. They're probably just going, I want to get out of here. But I think it's a really interesting subject, right? And so we don't have a problem engaging people. It's a really important subject because, as I said on the slide, humanity relies on the services provided by the Earth to survive and to thrive. And so geoscience, and AusScope in particular, has a lot of research infrastructure programs that are aligned with understanding the Earth and understanding our place in it. So we help support decarbonisation by supporting the discovery of critical minerals and battery metals. We help develop new energy programs through geothermal. We help store carbon dioxide in the earth so that we can reduce carbon. We help monitor groundwater systems. We help understand geohazards and the risk of earthquakes. And we help understand how the planet is responding to climate change and how society can respond to climate change as well. So it's incredibly important, right? I'm trying to set a picture here because there's more to come about skills. If you just look at it from a financial point of view as well, in an Australian context, you know, somewhere between 12% and 20% of our GDP is based on geoscience-related industries and activities. If you look at the exports, over 60% of our exports are based on geoscience. So I'm sure, having heard this, like me, you would expect that if you went into any geoscience department in any university in the country, it would be the biggest, most well-funded department that you could possibly imagine. You might be surprised to find that that's not true. And in fact, in Australia, recently we've been going through a period where a lot of earth science departments have been closed down. This is a cutting from a newspaper from last week where the community was expressing concern about Wollongong University's decision to close its geoscience department and close down a lot of the infrastructure there. So we have some sort of specific challenges, right? University funding models tend to be based on student numbers, and that's fine, but for the small departments, that's a real challenge. And they're not particularly strategic and they're not driven from a national point of view. So in Australia, we say bums on seats. If you don't have enough students coming into your first year class, it's hard for you to sustain the funding for your department going forwards. And you know, if I was a VC, I'd be making those same decisions. So as a discipline, we have to increase the number of students that are coming in. We also have a problem that compounds this issue in Australia, and that's you know, a little bit controversial, but we've lost our license, our social license to operate in the geosciences recently. Industry, the minerals industry has done some pretty poor things, and as a result, destroying traditional sites, you know, indigenous traditional sites, and having a perception of being a dirty, exploitative industry. Students don't tend to want to come and do geoscience when they start university, so we need to change that. And it's also very difficult for subjects like geosciences to find a place in secondary school curriculums or even earlier. So typically we might find a little spot in a Year 9 curriculum, but it's very, very difficult to engage. So there are very few students coming into universities going, I want to be a geoscientist, despite all the stuff I told you earlier about how cool it is. So we believe that this is not just a challenge, but we think that for discipline areas like geosciences, it's actually an existential threat. And it's an existential threat for the universities, for how these disciplines can sit in the university system and how we can support the research infrastructures that are required to do the, you know, I'm not being glib now, the really important aspects of the science that we support. So as a discipline and as a research infrastructure, we recognise that we have a role in trying to change the way we attract students. So we need to attract more women into geosciences and into science in general, into all of the STEM areas. We need to get a much more diverse student culture. So we need students from much more diverse backgrounds. And you know, realistically, that's the only way that we're going to be able to drive sort of responsible innovation, which is what our research infrastructures are here to do to a large extent. And we also need to get more numerate students. So a lot of the numerate students go down a certain pathway and they never see geosciences as a path. So what we do at AusScope is we have a number of engagement projects or outreach projects that we run. And we see that this is a really critical aspect of what research infrastructures should be doing. We have a number. One that I'm going to talk about in particular is our Seismometers in Schools project. So we have there's a map down the bottom here. This is the location of all of our seismometers in schools. So we put research quality seismometers that are part of our national research seismometer network. We deploy them in schools around the country, many of them in remote regions, many of them in Indigenous communities. And we deploy those with teaching resources, with support from our staff who go out to the schools and help run programs. And you can see in the top corner, Seema Musavi, who is the amazing leader of this project at the moment, who goes into the schools, takes the students through exercises, teaches them about science, but also talks to them about diverse STEM career pathways. and helps them to understand the opportunities that exist for them. The fact that these are research quality seismometers that we have there gives real gravitas to what the students are involved in. So they're involved in a program that's actually generating research data that's going into our seismic hazard programs. You know, and when the schools are quiet at night, this is really good quality data. Some of it's really, really important. Obviously, when they're checking their lockers and running down the corridors, it gets a little bit noisy. But it's really, really important data. And to the point where we've had students from Melrose High School in Canberra who have been co-authors on papers before they've even finished high school in peer-reviewed journals. So they get to start their university degree and they've already got an H factor that's probably as good as mine. We also run programs in primary school. So we try to get kids really early involved in this stuff. And so we do these footquakes where we get these kids to jump up and down, and we have one school compete with another school to see who can pick up the biggest earthquake from the kids' feet on their seismometers. We run similar programs in football stadiums. So fortunately, during Science Week, a couple of years ago in Canberra, there was an AFL, Australian football, for those who don't know it, fantastic game. Game on in Canberra during Science Week. So we put seismometers out. We got all of the crowd to jump up and down and see if they could make a decent sized earthquake. Fortunately, the following year, there was a different code. There was rugby union playing in Canberra during Science Week, so we got to play off the rugby union fans against the AFL fans. The rugby union fans won. And we also get the students to do more creative things. So at Biwa State High School, which is just up the road from here in the Sunshine Coast, the students actually made seismic noise with their feet moving towards and away from the seismometer to try to make a graph that looked like the Glasshouse Mountains, which are the mountains that they can see in the background from their school. So they won. We have a competition each year to try to engage them. So, I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that this is really important to engage students. I think we have a series of programs. We have also GPSs in schools, similar concept where we have research quality GPSs deployed in schools. It's not quite as exciting watching your school move very consistently 7 centimetres to the north every year as it is to see an earthquake come through, but still. We have magnetometers in schools. We have software apps that we develop to teach students about plate tectonics. And we deploy our Oz Geochem, which is our research geochemistry platform, into schools with teaching material that allows them to engage with that geochemistry data. So the point I wanted to make, as I said, is that it's really important, I think, for research infrastructures to become involved in engagement at that level as well, not just to focus on the sort of higher levels of tertiary education and postgraduate education to try to find our workforce. It's really important to engage early, but it's really, really hard to do it. And there are so many programs in this space in Australia, and I'm sure the same is true in Europe and the US and the rest of the world, that are trying to do this in a sort of bitsy fashion. And what we really need to do is come together and develop national programs so that we can actually benefit from the logistics that we're all putting into it and help each other to work out which schools we should be engaging with. But I think that there's a real opportunity for research infrastructures to come together in that space. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. So I hope you've got a bit of a sense of policy opportunities, facility staff, programs, perhaps some of those that reach out into our primary and high schools. But now what I'd like to give is you the opportunity to have a chat with some of the people that are located around you. So we don't have the opportunity to set up a full sort of global cafe around tables, but you can actually cluster into groups of 2 or 3, and we're going to give you about 10 minutes to talk about some of the examples that you've got or some of the ideas or dreams that you would like to have that relate to developing those skills that are going to be needed for future leaders. So I know it might be a little uncomfortable. You might not know the person who's next to you, but take 1 minute, introduce yourself, and then try and have a think about some of the opportunities for that interaction, for those training, for the skill sets that you think might be needed as a way of thinking about actions that you can take from this particular meeting, connections that you can make. So we'll have about 10 minutes before I'll bring us back together, and then we'll head off to lunch. All right, so turn to somebody, say hi, and have a chat. Thank you, everyone. Based on the conversations in the room, it sounds like there's a lot of great inspiration and ideas that are being shared. So without further ado, I will hand over to our MC, and I'm sure that those conversations can continue over lunch.
I expect they do. In fact, I'll offer you a challenge, colleagues, just to test the hypothesis that those conversations will happen over lunch. I challenge you to go out, not yet, when you go out to lunch, I challenge you to do it in complete silence for an hour. If you can do that, well, that's just the null hypothesis. We need to sort that out as quickly as possible.